A huge thank you to all of you teams that make it possible. I'd now like to turn the mic over to my mother, also our survivor chair, Queen Kathy.
I'd like to ask the members of the Royal Court to come forward at this time. It's been a privilege to work with this court of survivors. In their struggles with cancer, they have been strong and courageous, and now they serve as role models for others facing the challenges of a cancer diagnosis. I'm pleased to introduce to you King Don Hanson, Queen Jane Ron, Prince Paul Sukenik, Princess Sherry Fisher, and Princess Kylie LaGrange. She's sitting there. Our prince and princesses are going to share a few words with you this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to survivor Prince Paul.
Good evening. Thank you. Who doesn't want one of these? I wrote some thoughts down. I'm going to stick to this. Otherwise, if I just free flow, we'll be here forever. So I'm just going to read through this. Good evening, cancer survivors, caretakers, supporters, families, and friends. It is an honor for me to speak tonight as one prince among many members of royalty. Thank you all for your fundraising efforts that helped to make this event a success. I was asked to share with you tonight my personal experience with cancer. My first experience with cancer was not my own cancer, but that of a young 7-year-old named Jared. Jared was a young boy that I babysat for when I was about 13. And I babysat for them several times, but the first time that I met Jared, he was bald. And he had these magic marker lines drawn on his skull. And I thought to myself, boy, I bet his big brother got in big trouble for doing that to him. I did learn fairly quickly after that Jared had a brain tumor, and those lines were his target lines for his radiation therapy. About 5 years later, when I was 18, I began to experience some symptoms of illness. It was in the winter, and I was worn down a lot. I was sick to my stomach a lot. And the first time I went to the clinic, they drew blood, and they diagnosed me as having mono. They treated it for me, and I got a little better, but as spring came, I continued to get ill, often sick to my stomach and set off usually by odors. I went to the doctors again, and they did some more tests, some more blood, and they diagnosed me as having a nervous stomach. So they gave me some medications, and I continued to take those medications and helped for a little while, but then I still kept getting sick. So closer to the fall, I went back and treated again, but this time they found out that I had a stomach ulcer. Well, they treated me for the stomach ulcer, but this was the result of getting sick so much and throwing up so often. So continued with more medications until a little later in the fall. I still continued to be down and slow, and so I decided to take a trip from my home in Marshall to my parents' home back in Portage. And I got to about Poinnette, and I had some car problems. I blew a radiator hose and had to stop and was working on the car. And I was holding a wrench, or so I thought I was, until I heard it drop on the ground. I had lost sense in my hand. Couldn't tell that I was holding onto it or not. So I managed to pick it back up, and I focused on my hand to make sure that I could get the hose back on, and I got back on the road, which I probably shouldn't have done, but kind of a stubborn teenager at that point, about 19 years old. And I drove the rest of the way home. I guess I don't really need this, but when I got there and saw my parents, they were obviously worried when I told them the story, and we went into the hospital, and it's about 25 years ago in a small town hospital. They didn't have regular CAT scan machines all the time, but they just happened to have that day the mobile CAT scan there. And they did do a CAT scan and found that I had a brain tumor. And the local doctor kind of casually said, well, you know, this is something we can't really deal with here, so you should go to Madison in the next couple of days and have that checked out. Fortunately, I had some predetermined parents. They took me in that night, and later that evening I was in emergency surgery. They had to put a shunt in to relieve pressure in my brain and said, if you hadn't got here tonight, you might not have made it here tomorrow. A few days later, I did get in to have surgery for my brain tumor. Not before family members came, my brothers and sisters, pretty well spread out around the country. So when they all showed up and made special arrangements to get there, it was almost like they were there to say final goodbyes, because they really didn't know if I'd make it out of surgery. Well, I did. I had radiation therapy for about 6 weeks. The doctors did a tremendous job, got out everything they could possibly see. The brain tumor was located on the back of my brain. The radiation treatment seemed to take care of everything. I managed to have about several months where I had double vision. I could have bad balance and things that eventually worked themselves out. I was very fortunate in that. And so I stand here 25 years later, a survivor, without recurrence so far, and just happy to be here and happy to share tonight with the rest of you.